TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we're going to talk about books, authors, and the industry. And I'm here with co-hosts Archer Caldwell and Michael Laron. How you doing, guys?
Hey, great. How's it going?
Good. How was your week?
Pretty good. Yeah, busy too.
You're traveling, Michael?
Yeah, I'm on the East Coast here this week, so you can kind of see a change of scenery behind me, and I don't look quite as dark as I did in the last episode. So
that's good.
Trying to figure all that out.
How about you, Archer?
Still on the East Coast. Working busy though. It's getting into the end of another quarter. So what I do with my day job will ramp up once June comes to a close, and then March, September, and December. So getting ready.
Okay, good. I think so. One of the things I wanted to mention before we get too deep into talking tonight was just to once again mention Anita Solver, who did the, I'm still not sure what we're calling it, like a show card for TBR, and it's the sort of the thing that we'll use when we put stuff up on iTunes and the website. And the address for the website has changed as well, right, Archer?
TBRpodcast.com.
Okay, so that's a lot easier for people to remember. Yep. Are we on iTunes yet?
No, that'll go up tonight. We'll put it through Libsyn, and it takes a couple of days for the first one, but after that we'll have everything go live shortly thereafter. So I don't want to have too much of a lag between what we do on YouTube and what goes into iTunes, but for the first couple, bear with us a little bit while we get things layered in.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. So why don't we start with Michael? How's your week of reading been going?
It's been going pretty good. I finished Unicorn Genesis last week, I think I had mentioned, and I read the first book of Fat Vampire by Johnny Butura. So thought that was pretty awesome. I left a review on that, and also was privileged enough to be able to listen to the audiobook while I read it on the Kindle WhisperSync. I don't know if you guys have that or not, or have ever used that. But
I haven't.
It's pretty cool. It basically, if you have the ebook and the audiobook, you can switch between the two simultaneously. Or if you have a Kindle Fire, you can actually listen to the audiobook while you read it. So that was a pretty cool experience, and I'm starting to find myself a little spoiled. I'm looking for books that have ebook and audio on them. So, okay. But that was a lot of fun. It was an interesting take on vampires, and kind of almost a parody, but it kind of evolves past parody about halfway through. So that was a lot of fun to read, and I'll be reading the second one here soon. And I'm also rereading You're the First 1,000 Copies by Tim Grohl. If you've followed my social media and blog, I've kind of been posting on that lately. But it's kind of as a writer, it's kind of the ultimate marketing book. One of the best books that helped me start to build my email list and start to reach out to people. So I'm reading that for the third time. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been reading lately, along with still just trying to read a lot of blogs and kind of re-educate myself on all the resources for self-publishing that I read when I first started out but didn't quite grasp. So
that's cool.
That's what's on my plate these days.
And there's I've read the entire Fat Vampire series. I'm trying to remember, this was it 4 or 6 books in that series?
6.
Right. Okay. Have you? Yeah, and I'm assuming you've read that too, Archer.
No, actually,
no?
I haven't. I've read the first bit of one, but
okay.
I got enough on my plate with their stuff.
Yeah.
So what's up next for you, Michael?
Next up, I'm going to be reading, I haven't decided yet. I don't know if I'm going to jump into Fat Vampire 2 or if I'm going to, it's tough, first world problems, right? I have so many books I don't know what to read. I'll probably read some books by, I guess the guy we're going to talk about today, Michael Pollan. He's got another book out called The Botany of Desire, where he talks about plants and agriculture and how all of that's connected, and it's kind of like a seedy underworld that you don't really know. So I'll probably read that just because I'm going to mention him tonight, and I probably should read everything he's written. So I've already read a couple of his books already, but I'll probably read that because that's kind of jumped out at me.
That's okay. Cool.
What have you been up to, Archer?
I finished White Space Season 2 to put together notes for Sean and Dave. And then from a reading for pleasure perspective, I'm reading a YA title called The Loners. And it's a series. I don't know if there are 3 or 4 books in it. but basically it's taking place in a high school that has been infected with a deadly disease that only teenagers carry. It's fatal to anyone younger than 13 and older than basically puberty. And so I'm just early in on this, and it's as I was reading it, I said, "Wow, it's a modern day Lord of the Flies." And I flipped to the back of the book and it's like, "Hey, it's a modern day Lord of the Flies." Like, well, I know what I'm talking about. But it's interesting so far. It's paced well. The teenagers talk like teenagers. I was surprised that the language is a little. I thought to be YA you couldn't go into R-rated territory, and it hasn't been blatant. I would say it's fair to think of it like a PG-13. You might have one F-bomb dropped occasionally, but it's done well. The teenagers act and speak like the teenagers that I would see or what I remember being a teen, and it's nice just to kind of get a break from reading to try and frame research or reading to try and edit. But beyond that, I am reading for research purposes, and I'm still probably 2/3 of the way through Frankenstein, which is, I don't know, my 10th or 11th pass at Mary Shelley's classic.
And then you're going to move on to Dean Koontz, right? Oh.
All right, am I back?
Yeah. Were you frozen there for a second? Oh, yeah. Okay.
You might have been, yeah.
So
I thought I was muted. I thought you didn't hear me. I was just asking if you, after you've read Mary Shelley's, I think you said you're going to go on to
Dean Koontz.
Dean Koontz, right?
Yep. Yeah, so that is next on my list.
Good. So I've been reading Robogenesis by Daniel H. Wilson. And I'm going to try to do something here. We'll see if it works. I'm going to share my screen and show some covers. We'll give it a try this week, and if it works, it might be something we keep doing, and if it doesn't, then we won't do it again.
Sure.
So let me give this a try here, and you can tell me if you're seeing my screen.
I do.
Good. So
Yep,
this is the book I spent most of my time with this week, Robogenesis by Daniel H. Wilson. It just came out last Tuesday. It's the sequel to a 2011 book called Robopocalypse, which I'll switch to here. Do you see that?
Yep.
So I don't know, it's a little hard to talk about a series like this because, I don't think we want to give away spoilers on the show. We want to be very, very careful about it. We want people to be able to watch live and not have to worry about hearing things about a book that they want to read and haven't yet. So the series here is about book one is about a rogue AI that takes over the world, and it's told sort of after the fact, after what's called the New War, and it's basically one of the survivors of that war telling the story through recordings that were made by the rogue AI during the war. So the second book kind of picks up where the first book left off, and it's told through a little bit different of the neuronal memories, basically like brain scans of people who are involved in this next war called the True War. So I definitely recommend these books. It depends on if you like reading books with years between entries, because I really have a feeling that there's going to be a third one in this series. And the first book came out in 2011. The second one came out in 2014. I think that kind of puts the third one, if there's going to be one, at maybe 2017. So, I'm sometimes with that length of time in between books, it can be really easy to just kind of forget what happened in the first one or the second one. So if you're the kind of person who doesn't like that, I'd say wait until the third book is out. And based on how the second one ends, I'm guessing there will be one. If you don't care, then by all means, it's a really interesting series. And I'm going to flip to one last thing here. The way I would describe this series overall, I think the way it's been described in a lot of different places, is World War Z with robots. So if you like that kind of thing, it's pretty gruesome and a lot of fun, and I definitely recommend it, either now or in 3 years when the next book comes out. So let me unshare my screen here, and I'm back.
Yeah.
That worked out.
Nice.
So what I'm going to be reading next is I started reading, it's called the Choose Yourself Stories, which I'll come back to a little bit because the author I'm going to be talking about tonight is James Altucher, and he just happened to release a new book last week. I'm going to be starting to read Pines, the first book in the Wayward Pines series by Blake Crouch. Have you guys heard of that one?
No.
It's one that I think it's one of a few that Carl Sinclair recommended in the comments, I think, in our first episode. And it's apparently going to be a TV show on Fox. And I don't know if that starting soon or in the fall, but it's got an amazing cast, including Terrence Howard. So that promises to be fun. I'd like to read the books before the show starts so I can kind of compare the two. I'm also going to be reading Sibylla Byrne, which is the fourth book in the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, so hopefully I can get through that this week and talk about it some more next week. And finally, I'm going to read Hard Vacuum by Simon Canton, an author I think all three of us know.
Yeah.
It's the first. It's kind of a short one, a story that he wrote. I think he's working on the sequel right now, so I want to read that so we can talk about it as well.
Cool.
Awesome.
That's my week in reading.
It's quite a bit of books there.
Well, yeah, my to-be-read list is pretty big, and I some of the books that I'm going to be reading over the next little while are a little bit shorter, so I think I might be able to get through a few rather than just one.
Nice.
Yeah. So, who wants to? So one of the things that we're doing on the show as well is we're posting a weekly blog. Usually a couple days before we go live, I think, and with a topic that we'll then talk about and expand on during the live broadcast. And so this week's topic was the author that you would like to have a drink with.
That's right.
So who wants to go first?
Again, that's fine. So mine is actually more of I don't want to call it a regret, but when I before I went back to school to become an accountant, I was a bartender. I was trying to make it as a screenwriter, and so what I did to pay the bills while I was writing screenplays in the daytime was to bartend at night. And I bartended outside of Detroit, Michigan, and it was a nicer bar, and that's where most of the local celebrities would go to hang out. And one of them was Elmore Leonard, and I had had drinks with the Detroit Pistons. A lot of the Detroit Tigers would come in, football players, baseball players, basketball players, and hockey players, and then newscasters and whatnot. But for whatever reason, Elmore Leonard was the one that would just get me tongue-tied. See right there, tongue-tied the most. And he was the nicest guy in the world. And he has since passed away, and it was tough just because he was someone that I viewed as what could have been a mentor. Not that I, should have been so lucky as to have him take me under his wing, but he did it his own way. He wanted to be left alone. His novels became movies, and some of them successful, but his books always had snarkiness to it, just a wit and acerbic wit that it's hard to find. And but in public, the nicest guy in the world. He would take time, and people were respectful of the fact that he was an author. He wasn't an athlete. He wasn't a movie star. So unless you knew him because of a book jacket, you probably weren't going to pick him out. You're just going to say, hey, there's an elderly guy who dresses really well and drives a nice car. But just if I could go back, it definitely would be someone to sit down just to say, why did you not try to do more in LA, or why did you not spend more time in New York? And a lot of it was just he was comfortable in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and that's where he lived out the rest of his life. Super, super cool guy, and I wish I would have had time to just pick his brain for an eternity.
Cool.
I love that story. That's just awesome. I remember you first emailed that to us, and it was like, oh man, Elmore Leonard, you're like that close.
Yeah, he's the man.
How about you, Michael?
Well, I picked Michael Pollan. I mentioned him before, but I first was exposed to him in college. I read The Omnivore's Dilemma, and that really got me thinking about food in a way that I'd never considered before. He's a if you don't know who Michael Pollan is, he's a nonfiction journalistic writer who writes about the food industry, where our food comes from, how it's processed, just basically the story behind how it gets to the supermarket and what you're eating might surprise you. That's the kind of thing he writes about. And he's a particularly important writer to me because throughout my life I've had this strange relationship with food. You guys probably don't know this, but a couple of years ago I was actually hospitalized. I ate something very bad and ended up in the hospital with colitis. And I was there for a long time and picked up another infection while I was in the hospital. So I was hospitalized for like a month. And
Wow.
Ever since then, food has been kind of important to me. Just paying attention to what I eat, trying to be very conscious of my health. Being an African American, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all that's really important. And his books have kind of opened my eyes to the things that I don't know. And I just happen right now to be writing a book about a fiction book about vegetables, who are my main characters. And his books are kind of important because I don't know. There's such a stigma, it seems like, of not wanting to know where your food comes from.
Sure, it's easy.
We can eat a steak, but we don't want to know. We don't want to accept that it was a cow that got killed to do it. Or,
Right.
We're fine eating vegetables, but we don't really want to know that the pesticides they put on them are more dangerous than anything else you can imagine. And so he has such a great descriptive way of writing that really pulls you in. Like there's a lot of books out there that talk about this kind of thing, but I would argue that few people do it as eloquently as him. I say he's the closest thing you can get to poetry in nonfiction. Books are really worth reading, and his most recent book, Cooked, A History of Transformation, he talks about how cooking is so important and how we've spent less time doing that and what the effects of that are on our culture and society. So that's a guy I'd love to sit down and have coffee with or have a drink with and just pick his brain. I mean, he all the things he's got to know
So
about
do you have
food
to,
industry, horror stories.
do you have to drink just water though, or
I was gonna- yeah.
it's like a kale juice? That's
Yeah.
what we're gonna sit down on for nice. No, I'm with you though
Yeah.
on the knowing
Totally organic, whatever you drink.
Exactly, yeah. Because gosh, it was 2 years ago now. Similar. I just kept getting sicker and sicker, and I ended up going into the doctor and saying, you know what, take my stomach out. I can't deal with this anymore. And I ended up having gluten intolerance, and so very, very conscious of what I put into my body now, because if I do something unintentional, I'm done for probably a day and a half. And so my wife is very, very diligent to make sure that I don't eat bad things, and we go on regular enough cleanses to make sure that I have a clean body. So yesterday was nothing but juice. I started with kale juice and ended with beet juice.
Yeah. Well, knowledge is power when it comes to food. It really is. More than anything else out there. The more you know about what you're eating, the better off you're going to be. That's why I like his book so much.
Okay, so I just flipped over to the comments for a second to see if anybody had weighed in here, and it looks like Eric Gwynden's here. So thanks for watching.
Hey, Eric.
Welcome.
And he says he'd love to have a drink with Neil Gaiman.
Sure, yeah, that'd be cool.
Roger
too.
that.
I could see that, yeah. Have you guys read a lot of Neil Gaiman?
A little bit.
I haven't read his new stuff, but I read and loved the Sandman series.
Mhm.
Yeah, I read that. I mean, that's got to be going back 25 years by now.
Oh, yeah.
Great comics, back when I was still able to afford comics. Yeah, I've read... actually, probably my favorite book by him would be Good Omens, which he wrote with Terry Pratchett. Fantastic book. And last year's The Ocean at the End of the Lane, that was a good one. So I've read a lot of his stuff. I really like Neil Gaiman. But the author that I picked this week that I would want to sit down and have a chat with or a drink is James Altucher. He's a hedge fund manager and an entrepreneur, which probably sounds more boring than it really is. I don't know.
Hey, good people. Good people do that.
Like who?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But he's also an indie author. And he's written a bunch of books, but the one that has stood out the most for me was called Choose Yourself, and that came out a few years ago. And he, he believed in this book enough that when he released it, I think he said for the first 90 days or something like that, that anybody who bought his book and didn't like it, he would just refund their money, hands down. He believed in it that much. And so the book is, the title really kind of says it all. It's about choosing yourself, and just, not being afraid to say no to things that are going to harm you in your life. And he sort of has a daily practice that I really like, where you focus on yourself physically every day, emotionally, which for him is mostly just about removing the negative people from your life and keeping positive people around you. Mentally, which for him, he talks a lot about building lists, being a list maker. We've done that a little bit with this podcast, for kind of trying to come up with 100 topics that we might want to talk about over the coming years, and it's just to kind of flex your brain and build that muscle, and so you can get better at being an idea machine. And finally, just focusing on yourself spiritually every day, which isn't really about religion necessarily. It's just about being grateful about the things that you have in your life, and kind of living in the moment. And then the final thing he talks about a lot is just being creative. So that book really kind of meant a lot to me in starting my own writing career. And he has just released late last week, I think it was, kind of a follow-up to that book called The Choose Yourself Stories. And about a quarter of the way through that, it's a pretty short book. I have a sense that it's, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but repurposed blog posts, which, if you've never read his blog, that's a kind of a nice little compact, probably kind of a best of. I think there may also be some new content in there. It's kind of hard to tell, but either way, I love him, and I'm happy to give him $4 or whatever for a collection of blog posts, even if that's all it is. So I would love to sit down with him and just shoot the breeze. I have a feeling he's a really smart guy. He's a chess master. I think he'd be a really cool guy to sit down with and just talk to for half an hour.
Sure, I got a Choose Yourself blog post that I can share with them.
The title?
Well, yeah. Why I said no?
Oh, your Choose Yourself blog post.
Oh yeah. Well, I said no to.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
But he has titles like How I Killed Osama bin Laden, How I Foiled a $10 million robbery or scam. He's really stream of consciousness. He just kind of blurts stuff out, and usually with it's humorous and usually has a point, and it's so I would recommend following his blog, his podcast, and reading the books.
Yeah, I follow his blog, and I haven't read the Choose Yourself Stories, but it sounds like something that almost could have been added on as an addendum to Choose Yourself, from the kind of the way you described it. It seems like I know a lot of authors and writers that are writing on like topical stuff. They include like interviews in the back. I think I can't remember who did that with a writing book, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it differs from Choose Yourself. Yeah, Write, Publish, Repeat. I think Joanna Penn did that in How to Market a Book, didn't she? I can't remember who else did it, but
that one's on my list. I haven't read it yet, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's cool. Yeah. He's an interesting guy. I would second that. I'd like to sit down with him as well and pick his brain on what he thinks about a lot of the stuff going on now.
Yep.
Indie authors and whatnot.
Looks like we have a follow-up comment from Eric. He said he read Ocean at the End of the Lane. It's very good. Yes, Good Omens is awesome. It inspired my own book, The Reluctant Messiah.
Nice.
We'll have to check that one out. So let's see here. I think we've hit all of the things that we wanted to. Is there anything else you guys wanted to chat about before we wrap it up?
I would say, now that we're starting to flesh it out, let us know. I want to. Does it make sense to put a comment section in the tbrpodcast.com to have our listeners suggest new books for the TBR or authors that they'd like to hear from? Because ultimately, while we don't want this to be an interview-heavy show, we definitely want to be able to reach out and talk to authors as readers. That's right. The foundation of this is to we're writers because we're readers first. And every author, from Edgar Allan Poe to Stephen King, had a love of reading before they were a writer, and so
Sure.
that's so if there's an author out there that you want to know, hey, why did you write such and such the way you did? I'm sure that there's a story that there was a book, a novel, a poem that inspired them in some way, shape, or form.
Or music, or
Yeah,
something.
right. Anything, something had to inspire.
Yeah, maybe
Just no self-nominations, please.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe once we've been doing this for a year, we can get Hugh Howey on here or something.
Yeah.
Because he seems like another cool guy to talk to
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Easily.
Okay, so we'll wrap it up then. Thanks for watching, Eric, and anybody else who out there who might be watching that just hasn't commented. I don't think we know who that might be. So by all means, leave comments in the YouTube feed after we're gone. We'll kind of check back on those for the next couple days and see if anybody has anything to add or any comments about the show. And if you want, Archer, do you think you're going to add a comment section to the website then?
Does it make sense? I'm happy to. I mean, it's just a
Couldn't
matter
hurt.
Yeah, let's give it a shot and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Following us on Twitter at Archer Caldwell. TBRpodcast.com.
Be sure to read our blog. We'll have a new article up before our episodes start.
Yep. So next Sunday we'll talk about the pros and cons of e-readers and paper books.
Right. And then I guess sort of one final note for our 8,000 viewers. Next week, we'll let everybody know, but next week we will do one of three things. Either we'll go Tuesday at 9 as normal, we may push it back by half an hour, or we might push it back to Wednesday. We're not sure yet. So I don't like to be inconsistent this early in the game, but I have something that I need to do next Tuesday evening, and we'll kind of figure that out and let everybody know. Okay?
Perfecto.
Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.